There are a bunch of numbers in the Bible, and I'm going to give them to you out of order first in order to give you the most simple and then work our way up to more complex. The Bible's like that. It doesn't do everything just right on face value. It makes you do a little bit of research and work and scratch your head and figure things out. That keeps you excited about it. You know, if it was all just elementary, you'd be bored. Okay, well, some of this stuff, really, you've got to put some study into. Daniel chapter 9, Daniel 9 verse 2. Daniel 9 verse 2. Daniel 9 verse 2, he says, I've got my page wrong. In the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books. How many is that? Multiples. Not just one. People are going to tell you, because you're going to see the name Jeremiah, that he learned this from Jeremiah. He told you it was not just Jeremiah. He said books, plural. Okay, he had multiple scrolls he was going through. Well, here he says books, not scrolls. Books, the number of years, whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolation of Jerusalem. 70 years. That's pretty easy to understand. How long is it going to take? 70 years. Okay. Okay, that's very plain and simple. Let's find out what he was reading and the information he was given. Look at 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles 36. This, of course, is the number of years that they're going to be in captivity in Babylon. 2 Chronicles 36, verse 21. To fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah. Okay? So see, we can find out what Jeremiah said without going to a book that Jeremiah wrote. Until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths. Okay, so somebody wasn't doing what they were supposed to with the land. Now, you remember, they were supposed to, every 7 years, leave the land fallow. Let it just have its rest. That's right, a Sabbath for the land. And then that lets the nutrients recoup, and then you can replant. Okay? They were not doing that. They said, we can make more money if we just keep on going. Or whatever their reasoning was at the time. They just didn't do it. God said, no, that was a rule. And that's my land, and you're not going to treat my land that way. I'll kick you out and let the land have 70 years of rest, because y'all hadn't been giving it to them. Enjoy her Sabbaths. For as long as she lay desolate, she kept Sabbaths to fulfill the 70 years. 70 is 20 times 6. What's it say? 3. A score is 20. 3 times 20 is 60. Plus 10 is 70. I'm glad y'all can do math. Now let's go to the passage everybody's going to give you as the cross-reference, and it is Jeremiah 25. Jeremiah 25, verse 11. Jeremiah 25, 11. And this whole land shall be a... What's that word? Oh, nobody's made it there yet. I'm moving too quick. Jeremiah 25, verse 11. Desolation. Now that's going to be a key word. You'll find these key words that help you unlock what God's talking about. This is a good one. You'll need to know that word. Shall be a desolation and an astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Well, no wonder Daniel understood it. It just said it. And it shall come to pass when 70 years are accomplished, that I will punish the king of Babylon, and that nation, saith the Lord, for their iniquity in the land of the Chaldeans, and will make it perpetual desolations. Okay, so desolation on top of desolation. Israel's going to be a desolation. Then the person he used, Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon, to punish Israel, he's going to make them a desolation. He's done with them, so he's going to destroy them. Wow. Jeremiah, you're still in chapter 25. Look down at verse 27. Therefore thou shalt say unto them, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, Drink ye and be drunken, and spew, and fall, and rise no more, because the sword which I send among you. Whew, God can get mad. Look at verse 29. For lo, I begin to bring evil on the city which is called by my name. That if you lived there, that would mean something to you. He says, I'm bringing evil. You would think the devil could produce some evil, but if God says, I'm bringing it, whew, that's bad news. Okay, on the city that is called by my name. And should you be utterly unpunished? It says, you think you're going to get out scot-free? Ye shall not be unpunished, for I will call for a sword upon all the inhabitants of the earth, saith the Lord of hosts. And he did. Let's find it in another place. Zechariah. That's a fun book to find. Zechariah 7. Zechariah 7. If you hit Matthew, go back 2 books and you're there. Zechariah, Malachi, Matthew. Zechariah 7, verse 5. Speak unto all the people of the land and to the priests, saying, when you fasted and mourned in the 5th and 7th month, even those 70 years, did you all fast unto me, even to me? He says, what really happened was you were in Babylon for 70 years. And while you were crying and complaining, were you doing anything toward God? Or were you just bemoaning fate? That's what people do. Okay, so God had laid out right there, 70 years you're going to be in Babylon, and they were in Babylon for 70 years. Very simple. He named the number of years. Now, it was a little more complex in a couple of places. I couldn't even read it right. He said 70. Okay, we understand that. It takes us a little more thought than just saying 70 years. Okay, let's find something else that's going to require us to scratch our head. Daniel 9, look at verse 24. Daniel 9, verse 24. In verse 2, we saw 70 years, and now we're going to see something different. Daniel 9, 24. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression, and to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Okay, 70 weeks. This is going to require us to think a little bit. How many days are in a week? 7. Good. Y'all are with it tonight. Okay, so 7 times 70 is 490. That's going to be 490 years that he's talking about now. Instead of 70 years was how long they were going to be in Babylon. Now he's given him something totally different. Now imagine this. Think about this. If you're reading this passage, this is the way you should read it. Daniel's sitting there in Babylon, and he says, I was reading my Bible, and I came across several books, and I put all the puzzle pieces together, and I realized we're about out of here. I got all excited about it and realized we can't just go back if we go back with the same attitude we've got right now. Let me start praying and just confessing sins, and I'll think up anything I can, get God to forgive these people and have mercy on them, and then when we go back, it'll be a good thing. He's praying. Angel comes down and interrupts him. Says, well, you're right about something. 70 years is up, but I got news for you. 70 weeks are determined on your people. 490 years. Forget the 70 that's almost up. There's a 490 that's about to show up. Whew. That's not the positive answer we wanted in prayer. Let's find out what the Bible says about it. Look at verse 25. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks. Why is that important? He's reiterating the ground has a generation. 7 weeks. Remember, we're going to keep that in mind from now on, people. 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Now we got to do math again. 3 scores, how long?
60.
And 2 is 62 plus 7?
Is 69.
69. Okay, that's not 70, but it's 69. Verse 26. Well, I didn't finish that. The street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. Verse 26. And after 62 weeks, that is after the 69 weeks is up, the last thing he talked about was 62. So after you added the 7 to it, he's saying that block of time, after the 69 weeks is up, shall Messiah be cut off. Who was Messiah? Jesus Christ. He's going to be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come, okay, that's not him. He's been cut off. So there's another prince. The prince of the power of the air is going to show up. The prince of this world. Shall come, shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood unto the end of the war. Desolations, we've seen that before somewhere, haven't we? Desolations are determined by God. This is an angel telling him what God had to say. God's determined. The way this thing lines up is I destroy it. You don't have to worry about harming Mother Earth. Nobody's going to hurt it. God's going to hold it intact so he can be the one to destroy it. And we're about the ozone. We're about the one that's above the ozone. Okay, so we've done the math there. We figured out the 70 weeks. There's a 69 week that it looks like this. It's consecutive. All of those weeks run consecutive, and then there's something that happens. Messiah's cut off. Jesus Christ he came to his own received him not. Okay, he was cut off, he went back. So the 70th week, that last week of 7 years, has not begun yet. When he decides to, he'll start that again. You know when he's going to decide to? When I get out of here. After the rapture, the tribulation begins. That's the last week of Jacob's trouble. Look at Ezekiel 4. Ezekiel 4, verse 5. This was your problem y'all were going to give me an answer for. This one I had to do some work on. And I'm not going to say that I am 100% sure I've got all the answer, but I got a lot more than I did before. Ezekiel 4, verse 5. Let me show you remind me to show you a problem. I'll get back to a problem in a minute. Ezekiel, let's produce the first problem. We'll sort of answer that, and then I'll give you a new one. Ezekiel 4, verse 5. For I've laid upon thee the years of their iniquity according to the number of the days. 390 days, so that's 390 years. So shalt thou bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. And when thou hast accomplished them, lie again on thy right side, and thou shalt bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. So that's 40 years. I have appointed thee each day for a year. So we understand that. We have now 390 for the 10 northern tribes and 40 for the 2 southern tribes. So we have a total of 430. Okay. How many years, when he was talking about weeks, did Daniel tell us about?
69. 70.
490. 70 times 7. 490. 490 years in Daniel. But this right here says 430. How come the numbers don't match? There's a problem there, isn't it?
60 years.
60 years is missing, it seems like. However, he's talking about something different. We're going to see 3 different events. that are prophesied. The first one was that we talked about in Daniel 9 was the 70 years they were going to be in Babylon. The next is the 490 years. That takes you all the way up to when Jesus is taken out of here. Okay, that's what we call the intertestamental period, between the testaments. So from the time period that God quit talking to the prophets until Jesus Christ shows up in Matthew there, that is the 490 years. This one is talking about something different. This one is talking about, let's see if we can break it down a little bit and figure it out. The house of Israel, we'll figure them out first. The 10 northern tribes. He told us, Ezekiel 4 verse 4, lie thou upon thy left side and lay the iniquity of the house of Israel upon it, according to the number of days that thou shalt lie upon it, thou shalt bear their iniquity. For I have laid upon thee the years of their iniquity, according to the number of the days, 390 days, so shalt thou bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. Okay, the number of years will take us from the establishment of idolatry in Israel by Jeroboam, all the way up to them being carried away. Okay, we're going to find something here. We're going to find that God cannot stand idols. In particular, in his temple. Now, you'll have to make some kind of spiritual application to get a blessing out of that, because that doesn't apply to us. We don't go make idols, and there's no house of God that we go to. We're in a different dispensation altogether. Spiritual application, you can make the spiritual application. I don't have to figure that one out for you. You are the temple of God. Your body is. And any idol that you house in yourself, your mind, you make an idol out of, God doesn't like it. So, okay, there's your analogy if you want to take home something spiritual that you can beat yourself up with. There it is. I'm going back to history. In history, the problem was Israel, who was supposed to have God as their God, and he had given them all of the plans for the temple and the tabernacle and what they were supposed to do and what everything. They had defiled it. And Jeroboam in the north had given them 2 golden calves. You know, it wasn't bad enough that Aaron did 1. He had to up that one. Give him 2. This is the beginning of the end for them. So you know what happens? The numbers he's been given us, I say, is this: the number of years that they are in tribute to heathen nations. They didn't have to be in tribute to heathen nations. That wasn't God's plan for them. I'm going to take you to the promised land, and there you're going to pay all these heathen nations. No, that wasn't his plan. That was punishment to them. And so the north, they got their punishment. Let's find it. 1 Kings 12, verse 28. First Kings 12, 28. First Kings 12, 28. Yeah, this is the 10 northern tribes. 1 Kings 12, 28. Whereupon the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold, and said unto them, It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. It didn't work for Aaron. Why does he think it's going to work for him? But they give the same line. It's satanic. The devil has blinded his mind. He's still in that same business, blinding people's mind. Don't just repeat lines you've heard. Look at, stay in chapter 12, look at verse 33. So he offered upon the altar, which he had made in Bethel, the 15th day of the 8th month, even in the month which he had devised of his own heart. Don't follow your heart.
Amen.
and ordained a feast unto the children of Israel. He did this, not God. And he offered upon the altar and burned incense. Sounds spiritual, but it wasn't. Look at Jeremiah 25. Correct. Jeremiah 25, verse 30. Yeah, he didn't have any Levites in his 10 northern tribes, so he had to make him up some. There's a whole religion nowadays that has, they don't, since we don't have priests anymore, they make up their own priest and dress them up like women and tell you to call them father. Flip their collar around backwards. Jeremiah 52, verse 30. And the 23rd year of Nebuchadnezzar Nebuzaradan, that guy.
You know you told us Jeremiah 25.
Jeremiah 52:30. If I give you a reference and start reading it and it doesn't match what you're seeing, chances are I've told it to you backwards. I'm dyslexic, and the later in the day it gets, the worse I get. He says, the captain of the guard carried away captive the Jews, 745 persons. All the persons were 4,600. There's the end of it. That's how God handled it. So that was the number for the northern, 390. And that's where they got their demise. Now how about Judah? He told us two numbers. He gave us Judah in the south. Now Judah was much better spiritually than the north was. And they should be. They had the Jerusalem right there. They had the temple. They had the line of the tribe of Judah. Okay, so they should be doing things right. And it fell apart pretty quick. Ezekiel 4, look at verse 6. Ezekiel 4, verse 6. And when thou hast accomplished them, lie again on thy right side, and thou shalt bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. I have appointed thee each day for a year. Okay, so now 40 years for Judah to be paying tribute to somebody. That's not how long the punishment lasts. It's the 40 years is the punishment. It's not that I'm going to kick them out after 40 years, although he does do that. Those 40 years were a punishment. Now God always does this. He starts with a soft touch, and it slowly becomes more and more harsh. Landing in Babylon was much more harsh than staying in your country and paying tribute to another nation. But they didn't learn from that. So he says, we're going to ramp it up another notch. Look at 2 Kings 23. 2 Kings 23, verse 3. Now I'm going to show you a wild thing here. This is not the king you would imagine that this whole mess would start under. 2 Kings 23, verse 3. And the king stood by a pillar and made a covenant before the Lord to walk after the Lord and to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all their heart and with all their soul, to perform the words of this covenant that were written in this book. And all the people stood to the covenant. Who are we talking about?
Judah?
Correct, it is Judah, but who's the king in particular? Josiah. We think of him as a good king. There's a reason he was a good king. He got scared to death. He realized punishment was about to fall. Remember? They found the law, he started reading it, and he realized, hey, heavy hangs over our head. Look at verse 23. 2 Kings 23, 23. But in the 18th year of the king Josiah, wherein this Passover was holden unto the Lord in Jerusalem. So he gets right. We think of him as a good king. And he was worlds better than, that's probably not a good word to use, but it was much better than all of the kings that had come before him in recent years. Look down at verse 26. Notwithstanding, the Lord turned not from the fierceness of his great wrath, wherewith his anger was kindled against Judah, because of all the provocations that Manasseh had provoked him with. He was sitting there as a king, just a child king. And they got that book of the law, and he had him a good tutor that was teaching him the ways of the Lord. And he found out we're due some punishment. And so he did everything he could do. But you know what? It takes a whole lot to turn a person's heart as far as a nation is concerned. That's why it's scary to see the direction that America seems to be heading, because it takes a long time to push it in one direction or the other. And once the momentum builds, it builds. Obviously, the king getting right was not enough. The people had to do it too. And obviously they didn't. I'm going to show you something else. Well, I'll just give you some cross-references. If you want to see all of the info on that, I'll just read it out and you can run the video back and find it. In chapter 21, verse 11 through 13, chapter 22, verse 16 to 17, chapter 24, verse 2, 4, also in 2 Chronicles 36, 16. That's where you get all the information on God not turning away the fierceness of his wrath. Jeremiah chapter 25. Jeremiah 25, verse 3. Let's find these 40 years. Jeremiah 25, verse 3. From the 13th year of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah, even unto this day, that is the 23 year, the word of the Lord hath come unto me, and I have spoken unto you, rising early and speaking, but ye have not hearkened. Whose time is he prophesying in? Josiah's time. And he's saying you people weren't listening. Now we think of him as a good king, and as a king he was. The people were not. The people in their heart were still following the wickedness of Manasseh. It goes even farther than that. We can go back to Hezekiah as king. You know, most people are selfish, just naturally. And kings are no exception. Let's find it, Isaiah 39. Isaiah 39, verse 5. Then said Isaiah to Hezekiah, hear the word of the Lord of hosts. Behold, the days come that all that is in thine house, and that which thy fathers have laid up in store unto this day shall be carried to Babylon. Oh. That's information they didn't want. We're going to empty this house out. Babylon's coming in and taking over. Okay. The 70 years now, he didn't tell him it's going to take 70 years for him to get out of Babylon. He said you're going to be sent to Babylon. Let's find his response. Nothing shall be left, saith the Lord. Verse 7. And of thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Then said Hezekiah to Isaiah, good is the word of the Lord which thou hast spoken. He said, moreover, for there shall be peace and truth in my days. I'll get out scot-free. No worry about the generations that are following. His sons. And they're going to make them eunuchs in Babylon. Oh, but hey, no skin off of my back. I'm going to be just fine. That sounds like a good plan to me. Wow, that's the attitude. No wonder God's leveling punishment. Now I'm going to give you some numbers, because you needed some more numbers.
Absolutely.
He says there in Jeremiah, where was it? Jeremiah 25 something. Jeremiah 25, 3. From the 13th year of Josiah. Okay, so how many years did Josiah reign? Does anybody know? Of course you don't. I didn't either. I had to look it up. Josiah reigned for 31 years. You know what that number is? If you look in a mirror, that's 13. Flip it around. Now, I guess we got to look at the passage. Jeremiah 25, verse 3. From the 13th year of Josiah. That must be an important number. Okay, so that's when Jeremiah starts prophesying. Okay, so we've got that number. Josiah reigns 31 years. We're going to subtract 13 from it because that's where things start heading south. And that gives us how many years? So 31 minus 13 is 18. 18 is how much? 666. Bad news. Now let's look at the next kings that follow. Jehoahaz, 3 months. Jehoiakim, 11 years. Jehoiachin, 3 months. Zedekiah, 11 years. You know how long that is? He told us 40 years. Now, if you do the math on that, it's 40 years and 6 months. So obviously, when he's talking about in the 13th year, it was the 13th and a half year, probably 6 months into the year when he's doing this, because the Bible is accurate to the T. So there's your 40 years, and it's exact. Look at 2 Kings 23. 2 Kings 23, verse 26. See who started this mess? It's interesting to me that God does not start counting from the one who began it. He started counting from the mass accepting it. He started counting from Josiah's day rather than Manasseh's day. Manasseh invented this mess. He was the bad news bearer, but yet the people had to accept it or reject it. Just like they did when Jesus showed up, it was the people who decided whether they were going to accept their Messiah or reject him. Look at it in 2 Kings 23, verse 26. Notwithstanding, the Lord turned not from the fierceness of his great wrath, wherewith his anger was kindled against Judah, because of all the provocations that Manasseh had provoked him withal. Okay, so he says this passage is about who? You know the king in this passage? Josiah. Josiah is the king. He's not giving us this information under the king of Manasseh. He's still holding a grudge about Manasseh. But the real grudge is this: the people had accepted it. This was what was in their heart the whole time. Look at Ezekiel 6. Ezekiel 6, verse 6. Ezekiel 6, verse 6. Here's what God's got to say about devastation. In all your dwelling places, the cities shall be laid waste, and the high places shall be desolate. There it is again. That your altars may be laid waste and made desolate, and your idols may be broken and cease, and your images may be cut down, and your works may be abolished. So God's mad because they've done something. They've brought desolation on themselves by producing images and idols. He says, you're not to have any other gods before me. I know they knew the 10 Commandments. They may not have known anything else, but the Israelites knew the 10 Commandments. It's not like Americans. Americans say, well, I keep the 10 Commandments. Oh, really? Then name them to me. They can't name them. But they think they keep them. Yeah, they keep them in a book. Okay, look back at Ezekiel 6, verse 4. And your altars shall be desolate. Not the altar, your altars. They were religious folks, but it was pagan religion. And your images, he didn't give them no images. shall be broken, and I will cast down your slain men before your idols. Whoa. I'll show you how powerful those idols are. I'm going to destroy your men and throw them in front of your idols. See what he can do about that. Ezekiel 12 verse 19. Yeah. Ezekiel 12:19. And say unto the people of the land, thus saith the Lord God of the inhabitants of Jerusalem and of the land of Israel, they shall eat their bread with carefulness, and drink their water with astonishment, that her land may be desolate from all that is therein, because of the violence of all them that dwell therein. I've shown you before, violence is satanic. In Genesis 6, we find the sons of men coming into the, or sons of God coming into the daughters of men. That's demonic creatures mixing with humans. The Bible says the world was filled with violence through them. Violence is satanic. Now, it means more than just hitting somebody as violence. To violate the law. That's to break the law. Okay, that's a violation of what God said. And that's what Israel had been doing. Whether they were being, now they were being cruel, but whether they were being cruel or not, they had violated the law. That's violence. So he said, for that, I'll give you desolation. God's got formulas. The formula for desolation from God is violation on man's part. Daniel 9 verse 17. Daniel 9:17. We're almost done. I'm about halfway there. Daniel 9:17. This is why I didn't do 2 lessons. Daniel 9:17. Now therefore, O God, O our God, hear the prayer of thy servant and his supplication, and cause thy face to shine upon thy sanctuary that is desolate for the Lord's sake. Daniel's praying here, and he's saying, forgive our sins, and you told us we're gonna be able to get back into the land, and don't be mad at us when you send us back in, and forgive us and all this. And he says, remember, our altars are your sanctuary is desolate because you did that. But it was their fault. Look down at verse 27, Daniel 9:27. This is a verse about the Antichrist, the prince of the people that's going to come. Daniel 9:27. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. That's the week that follows the 69th week. That'll be the 70th week. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. That is, for 1 week he had made an agreement with the Israelites. You can use the tabernacle, the temple again, and you can do your offerings and everything you're supposed to do. But in the middle of it, he's going to say, I changed my mind, that's my prerogative. And then he's going to say, and for the overspread of abominations, he shall make it desolate. Abomination means desolation, according to God. So we don't want to commit anything God considers an abomination, or he wreaks devastation. Even until the consumption, and that determined by God, shall be poured upon the desolate. You're already depleted? Well, let me deplete you some more. To him that hath not shall be taken even that he hath. Look at Daniel 11. Daniel 11 verse 31. More info on the Antichrist. If you need to leave, you can. I'm going long tonight. Daniel 11:31. An arm shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength. Okay, well that would be God's sanctuary. And shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. That abomination calls for God to decimate, to create desolation. And that's what the Antichrist does. Let's find it in another place. Matthew 24. Matthew 24, verse 15. When Jesus was on earth, he warned them about this. Matthew 24, 15. Matthew 24, 15. When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Now, what was the abomination that made desolate for Judah and for Israel? Same thing. Isn't there going to be the image of the beast? An idol. Absolutely. God makes desolate for that. Look at it in a bunch of other places. In 2 Thessalonians 2. 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 4. Who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Okay, there we go. He's become his own idol. He worships himself. Isn't that what America does? Worships their own self. Okay, that's what the Antichrist is going to do. He's going to have a welcome crowd. They're already doing it for him. They're self-worshippers. Look at 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles 33, verse 3.
So does the Antichrist build an idol of himself?
Yes, the image of the beast. 2 Chronicles 33. Verse 3 to 10. This is Manasseh. For he built again the high places which Hezekiah, you remember reading about him? He's the one who said, oh, it's all going to be good in my time. Let the hammer fall on my kids. I don't care about that. Which Hezekiah his father had broken down. And he reared up altars for Balaam, and made groves, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served them. Pagan worship. Also he built altars in the house of the Lord. Talk about bold, brazen, thumbing his nose in God's face. That's it. Whereof the Lord had said, in Jerusalem shall my name be forever. And he built altars for all the host of heaven, in the two courts of the house of the Lord. And he caused the children to pass through the fire in the valley of the son of Hinnom, killing babies. Also he observed times and used enchantments. You know what observing time is? It's what people do when they go to church. What time is it now? Is he still talking? No. That's observing time. Observing time is to look at the stars and say, oh, my sign is this, therefore my forecast is going to be great or whatever. Nowadays they make money off of that. If you're lonely, you can call into this 800 number and they'll tell you whatever your sign is that you're going to find love. Because they know you're a sucker because you called the number. Just pay them some payola, and they'll tell you whatever you want to hear. But that's because they know somebody's wanting to observe times and used enchantments. Now that's the next step up. That's let's force something to happen by magic. And used witchcraft and dealt with familiar spirits and with Harry Potter. Look at that. Wizards. He wrought much evil in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger. And he set a carved image, the idol which he had made in the house of God, of which God had said to David and to Solomon his son, in this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen before all the tribes of Israel, will I put my name forever. Neither will I any more remove the foot of Israel from out of the land which I have appointed for you, for your fathers, so that they take heed to do all that I have commanded unto them, according to the whole law, and the statutes and the ordinances by the hand of Moses. So Manasseh made Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem to err, and to do worse than the heathen whom the Lord had destroyed before the children of Israel. God says, I have to destroy them. I'm destroying these heathen nations, and my children are doing worse than the heathen nations. I don't have a choice. I've got to do something about it. Verse 10, and the Lord spake to Manasseh and his people, but they would not hearken. Desolation. Ezekiel 4. Ezekiel 4 verse 6. This is what started this whole mess, these problems that I had. Ezekiel 4 verse 6. And when thou hast accomplished them, lie upon thy right side, and thou shalt bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. I have appointed thee each day for a year. Okay, to bear the iniquity means to bear the penalty of it. So that period of bearing the iniquity refers to the time of being punished for their sin, and they were. And then, of course, he told you there it's 1 year for a day and a day for a year and all that, so that's how you can figure the time. Mm-hmm.
My brother's not going to kill me. I'm picking up. I'm not allowed to phone.
Okay.
That's fine, Jerry, or something.
In Daniel chapter 9, Daniel 9 verse 2 has to do with something else. It has to do with the captivity of Babylon. So when you come across that number, don't confuse. In Daniel chapter 9, there's two events there. And if you're not careful, and I've seen some people do it, they think the 70 weeks is referring to the event of verse 2. In verse 2, he's talking about how long they're going to be in Babylon. That's not 490 years. They're only in Babylon for 70 years. There's two events there. In verse 24, Daniel 9:24, you find information here about this 490-year thing that's going to happen. He calls it 69 weeks, and then there's a 70th week. It breaks up. That 69 weeks runs consecutive all the way up until Jesus Christ is rejected. Here's where it is in the New Testament. Luke 19. Luke 19:42. Luke 19:42, saying, if thou hadst known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace, but now are they hid from thine eyes. He says, you should have known. You should have been reading Daniel and figured out the numbers. You should have known that it was this time the 69th week was up, and you could have accepted your Messiah. He's going to be cut off. But it would have been Rome that cut him off, not Israel. But Israel decided they didn't want a Messiah. They said, let his blood be on us and on our children. Kind of sounds like Hezekiah, doesn't it? And they're going to pay for it, just like the nation of Israel did. That final week is going to resume, and that will be, all the details of that week are in the book of Revelation. That is tribulation. And so that's all the numbers that we covered, because it started with one number, and then I had to go another one and another one.
Of course.
All right, so that'll do it for tonight. We'll get back to Ephesians next week.